The interesting thing about tech is I mean, it's obvious we forget this. It's disruptive. Like our little foundry product in technical financial terms is growing at an internal rate of growth in the last couple of years at 150% in America in commercial and 240% in government, which means it's like this thing that's just sprouting up everywhere. We started a company with 5 people and a couple $1 million. That's how you build tech. Less money, more work. You go get the money. It's how it's done. There's no point having an academic discussion about how to do it. Just like in America, the academic discussions are like, should we have vocational education? Should we have this? Okay, get the experts. You know, people are always like, why did this article get written by you about you? It's not true. They don't like somebody at our company or whatever. Yeah, those are problems, and we're miserable at dealing with them. That's not what we're good at. But I'll tell you another problem. If you're in a market where there's no competition, the people competing against you make sure they're bad articles about you all the time because they're not going to win on the tech. We know if someone came to us and said, hey, we want to find the terrorists and we don't care what you do with the data, we didn't hire them. And that's why we have, in my humble opinion, the best products in the world. And that's exactly a European approach. So I very much support it. But the one thing that's a caveat is Europe is weak in software. So if you're going to do this for cars and chemicals and clothes and everything else, you got to do it for software. And, you know, and so that's something that has to be, and by the way, now's the moment to do it because there's a very strong working relationship between Europe and America. And this will be co-beneficial. But if it's slippage where we apply strict standards to cars and chemicals and clothes and things that notoriously Europe is good at, but suddenly in software we don't have equal standards, you'll find that that's not going to work. I love data protection. I want it to be enforced everywhere. I want it to be enforced neutral. I don't want to have a political discussion about what we think politically, who someone in my company supported. I want to talk about data protection. And then we want a neutral adjudicator. But then there's a question of, do people believe that? Many people don't believe me. Great. I don't care if they believe me. I know what the facts are.
Not great.
Yeah. Well, it depends how you adjudicate. If you adjudicate on the facts, it's not great. It's great. If you adjudicate, and there I think Germany has also I would say something Germans underestimate is just, you know, the largest immigrant population in America still are Germans. They're just like, Germany has a very positive reputation globally. Realistic, everyone knows German history, but I would say outside of Germany, the Germans in the diaspora are more positive about Germany than inside Germany. And as you know, as a Botschafter, it's like an amazing asset. The reception of software and technologies is very different. So if you just take, since we're in Germany, what I would call a Germanic perspective, there is great skepticism about what could be viewed as violations of your private sphere, which already doesn't translate well into English, and the law, but as importantly, the cultural reception, products that would allow you to do things like surveil people. There's a great deal of worry, and I would also say there's a worry that Germany is an export nation. Most of the great products of the world that one uses in other areas are heavily influenced by the German economy. And so Germany mostly imports products from itself at home. So if you're living in Germany, most of the products you have in your home, your architecture, your car, without you being particularly pro-German, are going to be German. This isn't the case in software, it's very much dominated by American companies. Now, the American version is it's dominated by companies from the West Coast, but I think that gets lost in translation. How do you protect your right to have a private area that's your own as an asset? There's another distinction between America and, say, the Anglosphere. In German culture, people really want that in their personal life and in relation to government. So the American view of this protects you from the government. It doesn't protect you from a consumer internet company, and that's cultural and legal. So there's a great specificity about what has to be delivered. I would say, and there is clear, and we'll get into this. I don't want to take the whole time on this one question, but you know, how is this being done? Who's doing it? Where's the data going? Who controls the data? Is it transparent? Is the data something I own and manage or not? Converges with fantasies of how this could be abused. And in my view, so that's kind of my left-wing side, but Palantir's always been involved in finding the data and protecting civilities. So on the kind of more realist side, but it can't be the case that because of that, you can't find people who are involved in serious criminal behavior or involved in terrorism or are going to war with you, or these things require the use of data. And so Palantir's view is you do both. In full disclosure, the more Europe pushes granular standards, the better it is for my company. And what I care about personally, morally, but again, I think it's important to always kind of put your self-interest is it going to be regulation that is enforced by a neutral party, which, honestly, I would support as a company or personally, because I think, A, that's the way to do it. There's some reasons why that's crucial in the national defense context, which is that the West does build in enterprise software by far the best software, but you have massive procurement issues. Like the people who decide what gets procured may prefer ancient software that is built by a local provider. Now, by the way, I don't mean that primarily in regard to Europe, but like we had to battle through the integrators in America. None of them wanted the best software, right? So we want neutral adjudication of strict standards. I would caution that neutral adjudication, though, means it has to be neutral adjudication. It's like if you have, as an example, I'm sure data protection people are skeptical of Palantir. Great, let's see neutral adjudication. If it's about skeptical of me because I disagree with you politically, that's not going to work. But what I would really like to see, both for moral and particularistic reasons, is I think it's a great idea. And then you get to the technical thing. Will it hurt or help? I think, what the West needs to do to win these things is to raise the standard of competence so high that you have both moral and technological superiority. And then the question you always get is, well, how do you do that? Well, in software, and I can't speak to other industries, software is a magical business which has certain ethical challenges because the magic can only be done by very few people and they end up with all the money. So that's a real issue for our societies. That has to be dealt with, in my view, through some form of redistribution. Europe has laid out a lot of ideas about data protection, which, in my view, are, by the way, the ideas we conceived of in our product 20 years ago. So I happen to share these ideas. What are those ideas? Who does the data belong to? Under what conditions? What is the provenance of the data? Where is the data processed? Who has legal rights to the provenance of that data? Is it Germany or is it Palo Alto? Is it the U.S. authorities because it gets processed in Palo Alto? Or is it the European authorities? Is there a distinction between data and processing? How do you prove the security model? Can that be proved in a transparent way? How long does the data get held? Believing you're following a rule is not following a rule. You got to follow the rule. And by the way, right now, for lots of geopolitical reasons, one of the things I learned at this conference, many things, is America and Europe is working very well together. You want to get these things done? Get them done now. One of the things you learn in business, if you succeed, is you don't have time to wait. You have an opportunity for a lot of reasons, mostly bad. People like each other again. You want to wait till people don't like each other again to get the rules to work? They're not going to work. They will work now. As another question, is like people always ask me, well, we maybe get to this, but like, how do you what is the West going to do in the AI race with China, which is always the question. So, but they're very much linked. The West, especially America, and that hopefully will change. I really think Germany needs to focus on changing this, and France doing a lot, but some things I would do differently in making sure that tomorrow is not like today, where the strongest software companies all come from a tiny patch in America. But the procurement is crucial. It's like if you leave it up to entrenched actors, whether it's me or your local industry or whatever, to decide what the best software is, you're going to find, lo and behold, it's their software. Then who adjudicates this? And then that's got to be something where when you lose, you lost. You didn't lose because the person is trying to get people to buy. So that's the credibility issue. That's always the crucial thing. Who would you believe if they gave you an answer you thought was wrong?
I mean, I used to be a prosecutor in a former life. And
Former life.
Okay.
That's a unique interpretation of what you do for a living.
All right, fair enough. And in fact, that's sort of the basis of what surveillance capitalism is right now. It's the basis of your company, that you collect all this data.
It's not the basis of my company. That part's wrong.
Okay, fair
That's
enough.
right.
Okay, fair enough.
When you move to a network society, in fact, the network of your behaviors is actually you. Like you can know more about the network than the person knows about themselves. So node to network. And this happened where you are right technically is that insight does power the way in which you do certain security. So for example, if you in cyber, if you want to know who's going where's the data, who's robbing you, that you look at the network, you don't look at the node. You figure out the node by looking at the network. Why we've been very critical of consumers, they de facto are making you into a product. They're monetizing your data, and then you're getting nothing. And in fact, they do know more about you than you know about yourself. And they're not only that, they're influencing who you are, which has enormous political problems for democracies, which in my view, you see on extremes left and right. You might just think on the right. I think in both. And then you're imposing that onto what we do as a completely separate thing because, in fact, in enterprise, there are various things, but in general in enterprise, like in my case, we don't own the data, we don't collect the data, we don't keep the data. We do process the data. So now you could say a version of being critical if you accepted that architecture, which would be even a harder question, is, yeah, but you don't have to own the data if, in fact, your interaction with the data is so powerful that you get to the same place. Now, there you're doing a moral distinction on top of a legal distinction. You can argue that. I tend to think that you need to look at both, but in Europe and in European law, there's a difference between the data owner and the data processor. And this is a big distinction. Just like in American law, there's a distinction between access to the data and moving the data. You could call it academic, and we could litigate that, and I'm not on either side, but that's just the way it is, and I think both make sense. Both have huge weaknesses. People like you and me who would broadly probably disagree on a lot of issues, I assume, we might agree quite a bit on how you actually get these things to work technically. And if we agreed and we were like, I trust that third party to enforce our agreement, you might find the world is a lot better place. Because in fact, technically, and by the way, you could say, well, is this guy just mad? I would tell you it's commercially in my interest because I know we can do this. And I know, and the one thing I would say that typically advocates, which I respect on your end, should often underestimate is how technically difficult it is to do what is ethically correct. What you're describing, honestly, I don't know any other company that can do that. It's part of the reasons why I advocate for it. But it's very, 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 and what I would call it is a distinction between it's a broad imposition onto data of an ownership category where the rebuttable presumption, to use a legal term, is that you own the data. And to take switch the rebuttable presumption, you need a high standard of scrutiny that always gets scrutinized. I kind of suspect you and I agree on that. Okay, so now that has to be enforced. And then there you need technical specificity and you need an enforcement engine. And that, by the way, is going to have to be done in the West globally. With some modification, there are real differences in how America, Germany, England see this. But the commonality is what you outlined, and that can be achieved. You know, technology that is different and new does look odd. The people who build it don't look normal. That's just a different world, and Europe will learn to be better at that because the other industries are so strong and they know that this is a commonly known thing. Tech in Germany is viewed as a science project, but it is actually an art project built by entrepreneurs who are more artists. It's not a science project. It's not about being like it's not the same thing as molecular biology. It's delivering something someone buys. You all know that when you're delivering your best product and there's no competition, suddenly there's 5,000 articles about why it's not the best product, or they're bad, or they're evil, or they're too. It's like, so it's a problem for us too. Like, get some competition. Stop talking about these like salacious things that make no sense. Talk about the product you prefer. Don't stop writing articles about somebody you hate because they disagree with you politically. Ask them, what is it that you can learn from them? It's like, this is how you build a business. You think everyone I talked to in building Palantir, I liked, agreed with politically? In fact, I kind of look for people I don't expect I'm going to agree with politically. I want to talk to them, at least when we're actually talking. Obviously, there's an advocacy context where maybe we have to advocate. Okay, that's a legitimate debate. Ultimately, it's Palantir's position that we believe in the sovereign sovereign entity of Western democracies to choose that. So, for example, there are a lot of AI programs that are being built in America that I support, we support, we're part of, that I think the German government would not support, but maybe that will change. I think that's a legitimate debate. Then you get to the importation, more to Ken's question of like these technologies, under what conditions and I'll just change this to make it slightly legal, a non-predicate based search, meaning they don't know that you are guilty. You may not know you're guilty, but they get you before you're guilty kind of thing. I think we should be very careful about that. If you do an Ausschreibung and you list 50 characteristics you need for a product, you will buy Palantir. You may not want to buy Palantir, but it's like there are certain things that are written into the regulation that we provide, no one else provides. And that should change. But that's going to be a 5-year process. Our largest office is in England, in London. We have the Foundry product. I don't want to get into the details of it, commercial details, but in my humble opinion, is the single most successful product in the world now. And pure, you can see this in the numbers. And by a lot, built in London, used across Europe in industry. There's just like, it's not the talent, it's harnessing the talent. And again, I do think it would be really crucial to harness the talent with people who've done this before. A lot of them are European, they're just not here. And that's something, instead of meeting with maybe, well-known figures all the time, you can meet with some people that actually culturally want to be here or believe in the culture. I include myself. It's amazing how that can change. I mean, you know this better than me, but I only know I'm in these meetings with clients all day. But my sense is people are kind of working together and happier to see each other than in the past. Thank you. I really enjoyed being here.